your all is light image?
I don't think we're trying to make light of anything. I'm sure Taj would agree with us that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was somebody who was an environmentalist. He was a pioneer in the concept of what we call today human rights, in women's rights, in social justice. And so in all of those areas, yes, there are disagreements on sort of minor issues, or if I could call them the fringe issues that we do want to discuss and have debate about. But the fundamentals, the core concepts, the universal principles that underline and underpin our religion, those are issues that all mainstream Muslims agree on. And those are the ones that we're here to say, look, just like you, these are the values that we believe in. And not only that, we're inspired to propagate them and deepen them in our society based on the example of the most noble of prophets, Prophet Muhammad.
As a percentage of Muslims in this country, how many would you regard to be mainstream Muslims then?
Well, you know, statistics suggest that fringes are much less than 10%. So, you know, we're looking at over 90% of the Muslim community being very much what we'd like to say mainstream.
Right, believing in women's rights,
good citizens,
believing in environmental issues, believing in social justice.
Well, that's the model that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, enjoined upon us, and the mainstream community is concerned by those issues. Those are the issues that the mainstream community is trying to deepen and propagate. You know, the sort of fringe issues, although they do make the headlines, don't really are not the issues that most of us are thinking in our day-to-day.
Okay, Myriam, thank you for that. Dr. Hargey, the fact that there is a campaign in itself, that it will encourage people to think, whether positively or negatively, it will...
Yeah, I'm not against the campaign per se. What I'm against is that the disingenuousness of this campaign. I mean, on one level, people like this lady, I don't know who she is, I don't know how she addresses me by familiar terms, but people like her are saying, listen, everything is hunky-dory about Islam and about Muhammad, and here is this great man for women's rights, human rights, and I agree with that, but we do not look at the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room are these crazy hadiths out there which people like her and many others are refusing to disown publicly.
But Dr. Hargey, rather than Muslims doing a campaign saying we are not all terrorists, why not focus a campaign on the positives of Islam? Because that, after all, is what the problem is, that people are not being allowed to voice...
focusing on the positives, but when you have the elephant in the room, it doesn't matter how much positives you do, because we have a source of law, the hadith, which people like this lady, I don't know who she is, who says...
She's the media spokesperson for Exploring Islam Foundation.
I'm totally unknown to her, and so I don't know how come she's so familiar with me, but that's besides the point. The point here is that, you know, these people are disingenuous, and I would actually say deceitful, because on the one level they are saying, yes, Islam is this wonderful thing, and I passionately, obviously, fervently believe this, but I do not quote these hadiths that totally demolishes this wonderful faith of mine.
One would be forgiven for mistakenly assuming that Taj was actually against the campaign, wouldn't we? It's interesting because as much as Mr. Harvey likes to go on about the hadith, the campaign obviously isn't focused on hadith at all. As I said, we're very much focused on...
Well, that's his problem, isn't it?
The Inspired by Muhammad campaign is looking at the example of Prophet Muhammad and the values that he propounded, and those that are being used by mainstream Muslims every day to try
Dr. Hargey, let me stop you both for a second. Dr. Hargey, this idea of mainstream Muslims, that perhaps 90% of Muslims can be regarded as mainstream Muslims that will share the words that are on these posters. Would you agree with that image, that perception?
Well, I don't have a problem regarding Muhammad as a great, uplifting, inspirational leader.
No, I'm talking about this idea of this mainstream Muslim bloc of people here in the UK, 90% of which would agree in women's rights, would agree in social justice, would agree with environmental issues because the Prophet himself believed in such issues.
One fact, forget about anything else now. We have about 2,000 mosques and prayer halls in this country, and more than 90% prevent Muslim women from coming to Friday prayers. Yes, Friday prayer is incumbent, it's obligatory in the Quran, chapter 62, verse 9. However, most Muslim women, while they wear the hijab, because that's far more important to them, they don't actually follow the Quran, which requires them to go to the mosque on a Friday.
So that's why it's so important to focus on the model of Muhammad himself, who of course encouraged women to attend the mosque and to attend prayers. And that's the idea behind the Inspired by Muhammad campaign, is to say, look, the Prophet himself used to encourage all of these things, and let's draw on him as an inspiring model, not just for Muslims, but for broader society as well, because these universal values that he put out there. And of course, this is intent, we have to acknowledge it, to balance out some of the negative media that's out there about Muslims. We have to realise that there is a lot of negative media out there.
But Myriam, what about the negative aspects of the religion itself? And that's, I think, Dr. Hargey's point. Rather than discussing the negative media campaign against Islam, if there is such a campaign, what about the negative aspects of Islam that Dr. Hargey has just highlighted? What about a campaign that targets that?
I certainly didn't say that there was a negative media campaign against Islam. There is
negative perceptions. Well, you mentioned the word negative and media in the same sentence. So that's what you meant.
That's why the words are different. Let's be clear.
But that's what you meant.
There is some. No, if I'd meant that, that's what I would have said. There is obviously the fact that there are, unfortunately, these terrible events that do occur, and the media has a responsibility to report them, and they do get reported, and they ought to be reported. There's no question there. But there is also the fact that there are very many interesting stories that are positive about the Muslim community, and the idea is that there is perhaps not so much representation of those stories. So our story, if you like, is an attempt to redress that, as I said, in very modest ways, by bringing about a campaign which is not necessarily going to change the world, we know that, but hopefully put us on a route to saying, actually, you know what, there are positive stories about British Muslims. British Muslims are making positive contributions. British Muslims do share our values, and it's important for the broader society, as we've seen from these YouGov statistics, to realise that these people do exist, that we are there, that these values they believe are our values.
So Myriam, considering you're from the Exploring Islam Foundation, there isn't anything within what you're about to do that will explore Islam itself and highlight the negative aspects that are contained within the religion that, as I said, Dr. Hargey has pointed out, and then do something about countering those?
So we, as the Exploring Islam Foundation, is happy to partner with any organisations that would seek to, as I said, deepen routes for dialogue. Our interface, our organisation, if you like, is more of an interface. We're looking to create routes for dialogue with non-Muslim society. So that's our objective.
Okay. So you're
who we partner with and what their own objectives are within that. You know, we're
you're not going to be
various people.
So you're not going to be countering some of the negative aspects of the religion itself.
If people would like to submit, a proposal to work on that, I'm sure Exploring Islam would be happy to consider it.
Right, okay. All right, let's speak to... Colin, you want to come back in?
I would just like to interject just at this point. The point I was trying to make about the actual campaign, it may be very nice for people like me who are privileged to live in Oxford and have the Islamic Centre for the Centre for Islamic Studies and so on and so forth. It may be fine for the Imam to speak, Dr. Hargey, yes, but we have to remember that people are going to see these posters, and we can't assume that people are going to be learned in the niceties of the Hadith and the various aspects of Islam. We can't assume that that people are going to know anything about Islam.
But the thing is, Colin, if the BNP decided to do a campaign on the underground quoting the Hadiths that Dr. Hargey mentioned, then that would undermine immediately this poster campaign, wouldn't it?
That's a very fine point, I'm sure. But the risk, I feel, should be taken. I mean, take, for example...
I think most people, if the BNP...
Sorry, Myriam, sorry, let Myriam, please, can you let Colin finish his point? He's a caller, Colin.
Richard Dawkins' campaign, there's probably no God, so I can't remember what it is, so just enjoy life. Yeah, well, okay, but that statement is liable to rebound and make people think, well, is there a God or whatever?
So your point being, isn't it, that it's thought-provoking, and that in itself is a triumph, that the fact that it is thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
That it exists. Okay, Colin in Oxford. Sorry, we're going to have to sort you there. Thank you very much, Colin. Atik from Reading said, I think Dr. Hargey has no idea what he's talking about. Sounds like he has read a few pages from both books and comes on the radio. I think he's acting as a Muslim, but he's not. Sad. That's what Atik from Reading seems to think. Nihal, according to Elliot, says there is a hidden agenda here, proselytism. What Myriam said sounded like Muslim Brotherhood propaganda.